Good morning, everyone. Sorry, we're just trying to get up to speed here with our technology. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the executive committee meeting for Wednesday, April 5th, starting at 9 a.m. Welcome, everyone. And can we please have the roll call?
Yes, thank you. Member Tiedemann. Here. Member Hugh.
Here.
Member Call. Member Marquez.
Present.
Chair Balch. We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. We're now going to open up to public comment. This is reserved for items under the purview of the executive committee related to EBCE. Is there anyone in the public virtually that would like to make a public comment?
Yes, we have one member with one member of the public with his hand raised.
Okay, we're going to recognize you for 2 minutes. Please
Okay.
go ahead.
Kelly, you're recognized to speak for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Just reflecting on, the weather we've had recently, the incredible storms and the impacts and everything. And for me, it's pretty easy to make that connection between climate change and the production of greenhouse gas emissions. And I got to thinking about the last board meeting where the EBCE board approved a contract with a fossil fuel company that is running a peaker plant. So I checked to see where that was, and it's South Fresno. The plant is in a highly impacted area with very low income communities surrounding it. It has some of the worst air quality in California, which also means it's got a high incidence of respiratory illness, not only for children, but really for everybody who lives down there. And I've got to ask this committee and this board to please take a look at these contracts before they get to the point where you're forced into a situation where you have to approve them, like it happened last time. And ask that a report be given on where these plants are, where, what conditions they exist in, what the health of those communities is like, and then decide, in some way to avoid and prevent contracting with power plants and fossil fuel providers that are hurting us, not the people that live in those communities, and also the rest of us that are subjected to the increasingly rapid change in the climate in this planet. So, it's on you. We can't do anything about it. And I'd encourage you to just be a little bit more forceful with staff and get them to, help get us out of this mess. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jessica Tovar,
Sure.
recognized for 2 minutes.
This is Jessica Tovar with the East Bay Clean Power Alliance. And I wanted to, first of all, say good morning to board members and staff. And I wanted to reiterate that one of the huge needs in the community, which has been something that has been brought up repeatedly since 2020, is the need for microgrids in community trusted locations that community-based organizations have been asking for. And the need, really came during, the fires and the planned power shutoffs, and many of our residents going without power for as long as a week. And the recent heavy rains and winds have also put people in a position of, again, being left in the dark. And so again, I'm here to ask that EBCE listen to the needs of the community. We could use accessing government funding to build microgrids, revenues from East Bay Community Energy. We could also use the technical assistance, as you are experts in the energy field. And so we need you to act on this as soon as possible, because we do see the ravages of climate change getting worse and worse every year. In addition, I want to also uplift that many community members are also asking about a net energy metering, clarity around what EBCE will offer them in light of the CPUC moving into net energy metering 2.0, which is very deeply slashed incentive. This is a good opportunity for EBCE to offer an incentive that works for the people that you serve. Clean power to the people.
Thank you. There's no further public comment.
Thank you to our public commenters. I'm not prepared right now to respond to those comments. Does staff have any updates on the two issues that were raised today? If not, we could get back to the community members. Okay, we'll get back to them. Thank you so much for calling in. We're going to move on to approval of minutes. We do have in our packet draft minutes from December 2nd, 2022. I believe with one of us was a member of the prior executive committee, but as long as we reviewed the minutes, it's my understanding that we could vote to adopt them. Are there any modifications that need to be made, or is there a motion to approve the minutes as drafted in your packet?
Move approval. Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. All in favor of approving the minutes? Oh, actually, we have to do a roll call vote, so we'll go ahead and proceed with that.
Okay. Member Tiedemann?
Yes.
Member Hugh?
Yes.
Member Collins? Aye. Member Marquez?
Aye.
Chair Bosch? The minutes are approved.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to item number 4. This is brand evolution. This is an informational item. We're hearing background and update on new branding efforts. And I believe Annie, will you be kicking us off on this?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Chair Marquez. I'm going to give an introduction, but then I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Teresa McDermott. She is our head of brand with a deep knowledge and expertise in brand strategy. To just set the context for this a little bit, I wanted the executive committee and members of the public to know that this is part of an extensive public engagement campaign that we are doing in the lead up to launching a evolved brand. This includes an ad hoc committee, which Director Kalb and Chair Marquez are on, as well as I see that Jim Lutz from the CAC is on today. He is on the CAC ad hoc committee. So what we're trying to do is balance what is typically not a public process with the type of public engagement one would expect from an agency such as ours. So trying to balance what we're bringing forward, what we're sharing, but not acknowledging that it is still being baked. And so it's a little difficult to bring everything forward to the public all at once. And with that, I'll turn it over to Teresa to go over sort of the background, what we've done to date, and what our next steps are.
Great, thanks. You can go on to the next slide. Thank you, Annie, and thank you all for your time today. I will go through these kind of quickly because I know that we are tight for time. I guess if there's just 2 takeaways that I'd ask you to have from this, it's that we do need to evolve our brand expression to support our strategy, and there's a lot of upside for us to do that. And the second thing is, as Annie said, we do know that also kind of evolving identity can be a sensitive topic, and we are trying to be thoughtful and bring people along in that in a way that's also going to allow us to reach our goals. So with that, I will talk a bit about background insights, what we are doing around stakeholder engagement, and then a brief look at what's next. So you can go to the next slide, please.
Can I interrupt you real quick? Sorry.
Of course.
I apologize. I should have made this announcement earlier, but this meeting is actually going to go to 10:30, so I don't want people to feel that they have to cram everything into an hour. I apologize. I meant to announce that, but we'll be ending the meeting at 10:30.
Okay, thanks for that. I will try to keep it tight too. I'll leave time if there's questions, but thanks for clarifying. Okay, so why don't we go on to the next slide? And I'm probably telling this something to a lot of you folks who know this even better than me, as you've kind of been here since the beginning, but where we started as an organization in terms of how we portrayed ourselves as a brand and with our identity, it was very focused on education, because when we started out 5 years ago, the notion of the CCA was certainly not as well known as it is now. we were a brand new entity. People maybe didn't even know that energy choice was a thing. So the job of our communications and the way we presented ourselves was to educate, just help people understand, who we were, what we were, that we weren't a scam, how their bill was going to work, things like that. So a very educational and straightforward brand identity. So you can go on to the next slide. Yep, further kind of evidence of that, as you can see, the identity is very literal and very kind of in the category of utilities and other CCAs. We weren't trying to look different or sound different or stand out from the crowd. And in fact, we're trying to kind of do the opposite. We're trying to create trust and understanding by looking like we were solidly in maybe a space like another utility. So if somebody would come to our website, they go, aha, okay, I'm in the right place. These people, seem familiar. We also have a very literal logo. We've got the sun on it, and we've got a little river, and we've got turbines. So it's very literal. It explains, it telegraphs exactly what we do. The name telegraphs exactly what we do and where we are and who we serve. And the messages that we gave at the, as we were starting out, were very self-referential, kind of about us and what we were doing, as opposed to kind of flipping it and being more about benefits to the consumers. So again, totally logical place to be as you're introducing a service, a brand new service to an area, to try to engender education and trust. You can go on to the next slide. Thanks. And the great news is, we've been very successful with that. We've been hitting our targets. We are on track to make our clean 100% clean energy goals by 2030. We're putting money back into our communities. We're causing clean energy projects to be built. We have delivered over $19 million in savings and counting to our customers. We've seen other municipalities see that it's working and raise their hands and say that they want to join too, and expanded our service areas. So, and we're being recognized by outside entities also, like the EPA and the Cleanie Awards down there for the good work we're doing. So that's all, good signals that, this education, this trust, the work of our kind of early, communications efforts is paying off. So you can go on to the next slide. So that gets us to where we are today. And I think about this as kind of like our and phase of maturation. We've proven that we can do the supply side of things. We've got the commodity thing down, and we're serving as we've said we would. And now we have an opportunity to lean even harder into electrification and promoting electrification, and that impacts the demand side of things. And so we have this, unique position and kind of virtuous circle that we have with the ability to kind of meet supply and create demand by promoting electrification to try to replace greenhouse gas producing products. So this really, this and place that we're at right now is kind of what says, okay, it's time to evolve our brand expression and identity to match this strategy and to better serve this strategy, because people expect us to talk to them about commodities. They're very happy to hear about cleaner energy at a lower price, investing money back into your communities. That's a really, easy message to take in, and it's what you expect to hear from a utility or an energy provider. So, and in many cases, people aren't even making a choice, right? So that commodity side of the business, is well matched with the way we've been talking. But as we get over into the electrification side of the business, and we want to speed that process up, we are entering into a place where people don't expect to hear from us, right? Because we're asking them to start taking consumer type decisions, and nobody expects their utility to be treating them like a consumer brand. They expect to hear from, a car company or Motor Trend magazine about what car to buy, or they expect to hear from HGTV or Architectural Digest or something about how they should remodel their kitchen. They don't expect somebody like us necessarily to be talking to them about induction stoves and how beautiful they are. But we want to do that and need to do that in order to be successful in terms of driving this electrification that we all want. And so we need to evolve that brand expression to help us do that. So that's kind of the you know, strategic side of why we, you know, we think we need to evolve our brand right now. You can go on to the next slide. We also have a very practical, it's great. We're very practical and literal reason that we want to evolve our brand expression too, and that is our geographic expansion. We talked to folks in San Joaquin County about their impression of our name, among a lot of other things. But the key takeaway from all of that was that a lot of people don't, in San Joaquin County and Stockton, don't resonate with East Bay. They don't believe that Stockton is in the East Bay. And so there's just a kind of a feeling of being left out of it, but it goes further in some instances where some people even felt that, you know, the concept, you know, the brand of the East Bay was something that they actively reject, and that it feels expensive and that they don't share their values. And so it is, you know, it's this kind of resistance in these territories that we're bringing on, that it's just a headwind that will keep us from being more successful in serving those people and bringing them on board and getting them to access the programs that can help them. We know that will be harder with a name that references East Bay. You can go on to the next slide. The flip side of that is we do know that there is, you know, there is some risk in kind of, if we evolve away from our name. Also, there's risk in terms of confusing our current customers, those people that do know who we are. And these next two slides are just to say there is some awareness out there about East Bay Community Energy, or EBCE, but it's not massive. This chart tracks our aided awareness over time. So if you ask a customer, do they know who we are? About 30% of them say they know who we are. You can go over to the next slide. The next slide is unaided awareness, asking folks, again, customers who are being served by us currently, you know, do you know who you get your energy from? And about 22% of the people say they do, or correctly identify East Bay Community Energy, but nearly 50% of the people say they have no idea, and the rest of them guess wrong. So all of that to say, we think there's a really big upside in terms of evolving our name potentially, and we are cognizant of the fact that there'll be work to be done to bring those people along who do have awareness of East Bay Community Energy. But we don't think it's a hurdle that we can't get over. In fact, we believe if we have a kind of more inclusive and resonant name, we'll just kind of take them from this place of awareness they are and just grow them. So you can go on to the next slide. So that's the background on why we think now is the right time, and why we would consider it. As Annie said in the beginning, this is just you know, looking at stakeholder engagement now. We do know that this is, you know, this is something that's sensitive and that people have opinions on, and that a lot of people were involved with coming up with the original name and logo and other pieces of our, you know, external identity in the beginning. And so we are trying to be thoughtful and inclusive in bringing all of our stakeholders and partners on into this process as we go along. You can go on to the next slide. That's a, you know, kind of a pretty map. This is a practical roadmap for how and where and when we are engaging some of these stakeholders. You can see we're firmly in the middle there. On the April at the ExecCom review, we have a steady cadence of points of engagement along the process that you know, that we hope will kind of build trust and understanding as we're moving along. And the goal would be to bring you know, recommended new pieces of our identity before the board in May and June. You can go on to the next slide. The final slide is just a visual look at that more expressive chart to show the timeline there. And that's all I have for the group today. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for Teresa? Any comments, feedback? I can't see numbers, I'm not sure. No, okay. So thank you for this update. I did have the chance to participate in the meeting, so thank you. The 400 people that were surveyed, how did we get that information? Was that provided by San Joaquin County cities of Tracy and Stockton, or what was this exercise?
We used an outside research firm who has a panel. They access panels of people who have raised their hands and said that they're willing to respond to surveys. We included all of San Joaquin County in that survey because we could not get a statistically significant sample of people only in Stockton. But nearly, I think it was just shy of 50% of the sample did end up coming from Stockton, since it's obviously like the biggest community there. So we did not, it was a paid panel of researchers. The information did not come from the municipalities or anything like that.
Great, thank you. And it was 400 people?
That's right.
Got it. And then when is the next ad hoc meeting?
Next week. Next Monday or Tuesday? Monday.
So I'm pleased with the outreach efforts thus far. Are we gonna get into keeping the same colors for continuity? Will that come later in the discussion?
Yeah, we will. So the next step in the process is an examination of names and a consideration of evolving the name. And when we see you in the ad hoc committee next week, we will be talking about that process. And once there is a decision on a name, then that will be used as kind of the, a foundation for exploring the trade dress. So a new logo, an evolution of colors, things like that. And that would be the subject of later ad hoc committee meetings.
And then, as we evolve in this process, will there be an opportunity for an ad hoc group coming from Tracy and Stockton to weigh in? Or how are we getting their specific input?
Annie, do you want to take that one? You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry, I was double muted. We do have our directors from both Tracy and Stockton sitting on the ad hoc committee. So we are being sensitive to their thoughts and viewpoints on this.
Great. Any other? Go ahead.
Excuse me. Sorry about that. Thank you, Annie and Teresa, for all your work on this. I can't remember, I asked this question before. Was there a consultant hired to help us with this, or will it be after we pick a name, or what's our plan there?
We are currently working with a brand strategy and design firm called Landscape on this process.
That's probably a question. Thank you. The names that were explicitly offered as some of the options.
Oh.
1, 2, 3, 4, 7, including our current name. We're not wedded to just those, is that correct?
No, those, I should have been specific when those were just kind of, straw men, something for people to react to and to provide a foil to our existing name. They're not necessarily names that are under consideration in the process.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. I mean, that's, thank you. I think I mentioned this in one of our ad hoc committee meetings, and I'll say it again. To the extent that we continue with the term community energy, I would prefer it be clean energy, like many other CCAs have done from their get-go. And I think that's a more direct message to really a big reason as to why we were created. And it would attract more people as well. I mean, they're both okay, but if we do have a full name and we're considering community energy, I would prefer clean energy. So I'd like that as part of the discussion mix. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you again for your great work on this.
Thank you. Before we hear from any other members, I apologize. I should have opened public comment first, and I believe we do have a member from the public that would like to speak. So they can be recognized. Thank you.
Tom Kelly, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Adrian. I thought you might be interested in a little bit of a history of the logo. I was working for the Community Development Agency and the startup to EBCE, and we hired the firm MIG to come up with a logo. And if you look at that logo, what does it tell you? It's got turbines, it's got sun, and it's got water, all indicative of what we on the steering committee and consultants thought was supposed to be the future of EVCE. It's all renewable, it's all carbon free. And that was actually true of EVCE in 2018 and 2019 in terms of its comparison to PG&E. If you look at the power supply now, it's full of greenhouse gas emissions as a result of system power. So, you know, consider this. Why not adapt that logo to show the relationship of the percentages of renewable, carbon-free, and greenhouse gas emitting sources? So that maybe in that logo, we actually have a fossil fuel power plant. And I know this sounds a little sarcastic, but the thing is that we keep advertising ourselves as clean, green, and words to that effect. But the truth is we're not. We're 5 times worse than PG&E. We're the highest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions, almost the highest in Northern California. And yet, you know, we want to produce this image of an organization, an agency that really doesn't do what it is putting out to the public. So let's either clean up the power supply or tell the truth about what we're actually providing to the to customers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard, for your comments. We hear you loud and clear. That is something we're looking to. We will be addressing and getting back to you soon. Are there any public comments?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, go ahead.
Jessica Tovar, you recognize for 2 minutes.
Hi, Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. I wanted to just emphasize that one of the huge differences and the things that we kind of advocated for in the community was to get off of PG&E when it comes to electricity. And when we advocated for a community choice program, the comparison was you have PG&E who's accountable to their investors. You have community choice who's supposed to be accountable to their community. And so that to me makes a case for keeping the community energy in the name. And then the other piece is, you know, I did hear a board member sometime back when we were talking originally about having Stockton join the program and the potential, like it's time to consider changing the name. And somebody said on the board, we should probably change it to East Bay Valley Community Energy. And I kind of felt like that wasn't so different from what you have now, but it was enough to like acknowledge that there are other communities. And I do think that not changing your name drastically would be smart. And then the other thing is not relying too much on acronyms, because I do feel like acronyms are very alienating to what your name actually is and your whole, you know, emphasis. So anyways, I thought I'd give my 2 cents. There were other names in the stakeholder survey that I did participate in that were just kind of sounding very corporate. And I do think that that would be a huge mistake for East Bay Community Energy to move into a name that just sounds like any other company. And I will say that I met somebody who's newly the CEO of a community choice program in New York. And one of the things that she said about California Community Choice was that they are very corporate and that she's not going to run her community choice program like that. And so I just want to emphasize that and give my 2 cents. Thank you.
Are there any more public comments?
There are no further public comments.
Okay, thank you. Just wanting to get back to the discussion, sorry, to public comments first, but before we close this item, are there any other members that would like to make any comments or input at this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 5. This is transportation electrification loan, $3 million loan for heavy duty vehicle electrification project. And whoever's gonna kick us off, go right ahead.
Great. Thanks very much. Can you all hear me? This is JP Ross, Vice President of Local Development. Fantastic. So I'll start off today, and then Nils Zeller will fill in on the loan. This is a project that we've been working on since 2022 now. If we can go to the next slide, Adrian. So we did approve in last year's budget up to $3 million for medium and heavy duty projects in the form of capital or financing. And that's because medium and heavy duty vehicle electrification vehicles are a major source of pollutants in our territory, and that only becomes a larger portion of emissions when we look to the Central Valley and Stockton as well. So we really want to be leaning in to electrifying this space. So we approved budget for these types of projects in our last fiscal year process in June of 2022. In September, we issued a request for offers for projects that could deliver medium and heavy duty vehicle electrification as well as charging infrastructure within our territory by 2024. We did get applications a month after that and began diligence and have selected a project and a counterparty and are planning to close the loan at the April board meeting. And as required in the RFO, the project was required to become in operation by September of 2024. The project we're selecting is supposed to reach COD, commercial operation date, in July of 24, and then we would fund this loan after commercial operation has been achieved. Next slide, please. So the project that we have selected is called the Greenville CCD. It is a project that delivers both charging infrastructure and vehicles to heavy-duty drayage operators at a new site that's being developed in Livermore. The project will also have solar and storage on site to reduce emissions and the cost of providing the service to drayage operators. It's about a 4.5 acre brownfield site close to I-580. The total project cost is just over $14 million. One of the requirements in our request for proposals was that our funding would be highly leveraged, meaning other capital would be brought into the project. So it meets that leveraging requirement. The project's going to be capable of charging up to 100 vehicles per day. Installation of the infrastructure at this project will require prevailing wage as per our agreement with the counterparty, who is also committed to using RE100, our 100% renewable energy product, in order to provide electricity to the vehicles. And as noted, with the emissions of medium and heavy duty vehicles, this project is projected to reduce a significant amount of greenhouse gas and particulate emissions over the lifetime of the project, which is 10 years. Next slide, and I'll pass it off to Nils Zeller to talk about the actual loan.
Thank you, JP. Nils Zeller is here, Director of Clean Energy Structured Finance. I joined East Bay Community Energy in September of 2022. And this is one of the first projects I've been able to have the privilege to work on, along with some others on the local programs team. I think, as mentioned, the total project size here is 14.3 million. Our loan is anticipated to close somewhere between 3 to 4.5 million to support the facility construction. As JP mentioned, our loan will be coming in after commercial operations date, so it'll take out construction financing that will be used. And that allows us to avoid the risk of the construction risk associated with this new project. We're going to be offering an interest rate on the loan of 5%, which is an attractive rate and is intended to encourage these types of projects in our communities. The loan itself is a 10-year term loan, which matches with the the land lease that the project has with the landowner at the site. We are offering some flexibility in structuring the loan and meeting the needs of the customer, the project. We're offering 12 months of interest only or capitalizing interest, meaning no payments for the first 12 months. And then the loan will amortize evenly over the remaining 9 years of the loan. This allows the project company to sign contracts, get customers on board, but not necessarily need to make loan payments for the first 12 months, which is quite beneficial. This type of repayment provides the flexibility, provides an important piece of flexibility for them and doesn't present a significant risk to the loan repayment for East Bay Community Energy. And as again, fits well with the project. The loan will be secured by an all assets lien on the project company and utilize a deed of trust and a UCC filing with the state of California. So in a variety of ways, we're following all of the typical practices of a commercial lender, but we're making some strategic decisions around flexibility to incentivize these types of projects be built. And part of that flexibility we can offer is that we have a unique understanding of these types of projects and what it takes for them to be successful. Our payments are going to be guaranteed by another entity in the ownership structure. And we've also elected not to charge any closing fees or legal fees to the project company. Although we may choose to do that in the future, it depends on a variety of factors. We are deciding whether we're going to be deploying $3 to $4.5 million in loan capital. The conversations with the borrower right now and working towards a final close this month, as JP mentioned. At the lower end, $3 million, that would generate around $830,000 in net interest income for East Bay Community Energy, and at the top end, 4.5 million, we would generate 1.25 million in interest income, both of which we would be able to recycle into the organization's mission, other programs. And lastly, as JP mentioned, we were going to be able to generate significant leverage in this financing, with our capital being a relatively minority portion of the full capital stack, and we'll be able to achieve at least 3x leverage, which is one of our goals. Next slide, please. Lastly, a little bit on Forum Mobility. Forum Mobility is the, say, parent sponsor of the project. They're seeking to build charging depots throughout our community and in California more broadly. And our goal is to address the nearly 29,000 drayage trucks serving the ports of California and rail yards in California. Electrifying those vehicles will have a tremendous impact on avoiding emissions, as JP mentioned. Forum Mobility has an exceptional team with experienced folks across the spectrum of technology and commercial expertise in battery electric vehicles, energy storage, EV charging, and solar development. And together they do provide the capacity for true end-to-end development and operation of this type of project, which is what gave us confidence in the project and the loan we're providing to them. And as of today, Forum Mobility is also planning on 2 additional charging hubs in the East Bay Community Energy service territory, which is quite exciting. That is it for me. I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you so much, Nils. Before we do that, I'm going to recognize it and see if we have any public commenters.
We have no public commenters at this time.
Okay, I'm just going to make the announcement one more time in case people are stepping away to get their coffee. If you'd like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Backwards from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. No.
There's no public comment.
Okay, great. Now we'll open up to comments from board members or questions. No, go ahead.
Maybe for a microphone, thank you for this. This is very exciting, and I think Ford Mobility can do this. What are we expecting in terms of new drayage trucks at the Port of Oakland as part of this project? Do we have an estimate there?
I can take this, Nils. So this project is in Livermore and not specifically on the port. Forum is planning for a new project on the port. We've been thinking about potential ways to link these two, but I think in this case, the vehicles would be serving the port, but not on the port. So they've
JP,
got
and I
the
think that's the
flexibility
operative point, though, is
Yeah.
that these trucks will all be in service of port-related logistics. So when you think about the benefits of this project, I think they accrue to the communities surrounding the port in the same way a charging project located at the port would. I think my understanding is this is really sort of a timing question. If you're driving a drayage truck from the port to, say, Tracy, back and forth every day, you need to have charging in sort of Livermore, the Tracy area, and then you need to have charging sort of adjacent to the port or on port property. So this just happens to be the project that's on the other end of the route, but in service of the port. And what is the number of trucks? 40?
The potential support is 100. The original submission to us was to support the initial 24, but they have plans to serve more trucks than that at this facility.
Yep, a portion of the facility will charge trucks that Forum Mobility owns and leases to independent entities, and then it'll also be charging trucks that are owned by third parties.
So are these, maybe we don't know the answer to this, but do we expect that these will be displacing currently used 30 trucks, or are they going to just be added to the mix and kind of replace?
Yeah, this is for displacing existing trucks. So the target audience is existing drayage operators who are transitioning their vehicles, and the Forum offer, the lease offer for the vehicle plus charging, is planned to be lower than the current operating cost of a diesel truck. So that's part of their value offer to existing operators, is to lower their operational costs by transitioning to an electric drayage vehicle. And there's a lot of turnover, older trucks that are needing to be taken off the road. And so this is kind of an offer to those operators to get into an electric vehicle that's a lower operating cost.
Dan, I think the good analog is if you think about 15 years ago when solar as a service started to become common, and school districts would install it, and that would not only improve their carbon footprint, but also reduce their operating costs, creating that kind of win-win dynamic. So we view this as a first time application of that model into this sector, and why we're excited to partner.
JP mentioned something that my next question are, as you know, the really old diesel trucks are the worst, and the newer-ish diesel trucks are still bad, but not as bad. Can we be assured that these are going to displace the worst of the worst diesel trucks? Can we put some kind of requirement in that effect?
Dan, I think that we will not, we're not in a position to make a requirement, but under the California Clean Fleets rule, it is pre-2009 trucks that are coming off the rolls of DMV registration. And so that is the market that is being served here.
Right, but the trucks from the 90s, which are still in operation, are much worse.
Yeah, yes, that's right. But I just don't think that we're in a position here to mandate specifically, which trucks come off first. What's being targeted here are the folks that have to, particularly small operators that have to switch their trucks out. And so, I would expect that, we'll hopefully we'll get a mix. But no, I think it would be challenging for us to make that kind of an operational mandate when we're a project lender, not a operator of the project.
You just make it a project goal as opposed to a mandate and just give it a shot.
Yeah, I certainly think that it's something we can, work with Forum around, and we have a lot of good data on this. So that's a great thing for us to kind of help them when they think about the targeting. But I think we're not in a position to make it a requirement, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, I'm excited about the opportunity. I'm just thinking, is there any way for cities to partner with this project and the vehicles within their fleet that can be upgraded? Has there been any discussions with any municipalities?
I think the audience here of drayage operators are not really kind of city fleet vehicles. We do have separate work going right now to provide cities with fleet electrification technical assistance. So that's kind of a separate program that we've been running for a while now and are providing that guidance to our.
Thank you. And what's the timeline for this project to be up and running in Livermore? At least the charging option.
Should be up and running in July of 2024.
And where is the exact location? I know you said it's off of 580, but what exit do you know in Livermore?
I don't have the
It's in, sorry, I don't have the exact address. It's in Livermore, and we can get you the exact address easily. I just don't have it memorized. Sorry.
And then will there be an update, let's say in the fall, to tell us how many trucks have been replaced and just kind of the benefits of this project? When will we get into?
Yeah, we'll be getting metrics after project delivery on the utilization rates and the emissions offsets that will be kind of based on the vehicles that have been transitioned to electric. So there's a requirement on kind of annual delivery of those types of metrics after the project's gone into operations. So we will be providing that back to the board once the project's in operation.
Okay.
To the previous question, if I may, the project site is 151 Greenville Road in Livermore.
Thank you so much. Do members have any other questions, comments, input? Okay. I'm going to reopen public comment. It looks like we do have one that would like to make comments. If there's anyone else listening that would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. After this member speak, if no one raises their hand, we will close public comment on this item. Go ahead and we could recognize the community member.
Great. Tom Kelly, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Adrian. I think this is a really interesting project, and I hope that all goes well with it. If you ever drive that, I guess it's a 680 out towards Stockton, in the morning, you just see truck after truck after truck coming from the Central Valley out to the Bay Area. I stepped out for a minute. I may have missed this, but I wonder if you commented on low carbon fuel standard credits and who might actually receive those. Is that it, part of this project? That's it.
Thank you. Do we have any more public comments?
There's no further.
Would you like us to respond to the question?
Yes, so low carbon fuel standards credits are part of this project. They are kind of part of the cost stack that then delivers the lower cost of operation to the vehicle operators. So that's kind of all rolled into the product that is on offer to the drayage operators.
Thank you. Going to close this item and move on to item number 6. This is emissions overview. This is also an informational item. And, we're ready for the staff report.
Thank you. Is anyone here okay? All right, my name is Ivy Schwartzman. I'm the Power Resources Manager here, and this is primarily an overview on emissions specific to Bright Choice. Slide, please. And that will be the kind of running theme throughout the slides here. So we'll talk through EBC products and what contributes to emissions for those products. We'll talk about where Bright Choice is started and where it's at now. Several changes that took place in 2020 that affected procurement and emissions reporting, and finally where we are now, including a comparison against other CCAs and a snapshot of 22 power content. Just to start off, setting the stage for what power content is, what we're actually talking about here. So it's an annual requirement that's a detailed breakdown on sources of energy used to provide electricity, resembles a nutrition label. The example on the right is our 2021 and most recent power content label. Submission requires formal third-party audit, and it's reviewed and approved by the CEC. Shows us what types of energy that we paid for through both direct and indirect transactions. So an example of a direct transaction is when we get electricity from a solar resource under a long-term PPA, or through a short-term transaction, also through a specific resource like a specific hydro generator in Washington State. An example of an indirect transaction is when we buy electricity from the CAISO. We have an open position. Those show up on our power content label as unspecified sources of power, because we don't know exactly which generator or generators that those are coming from. It's assigned an emissions factor that's supposed to be reflective of the average emissions of the electric system. A couple of distinctions that I just want to make early here. Power content label is a different methodology than RPS. RPS compliance is multi-year. Power content label, again, is an annual requirement. It's a different program and different compliance obligations. I think it's also an important distinction to make that RPS versus renewable energy. RPS is, they're used interchangeably often, and they're really not the same. One is a policy and fixed target, and renewable energy is a fuel. So it's just important to make that distinction as well before we move on. Next slide, please. So this is EVC's current products. Renewable 100, which is 100% renewable energy from California solar and wind. It comes at a slightly higher price than PG&E. And Bright Choice, which is our basic plan, it costs than PG&E. What you're seeing here is basically a visual representation of the data that we just saw on that power content label on the previous slide and what was reported. So for renewable 100, 100% of the customer load for that product is served by solar and wind. For Bright Choice, we've got about 42% renewable power, and it's about 16% hydro from there. A small portion of nuclear, a small portion of biomass, and that gray portion there is unspecified power. I guess just to talk a little bit more about unspecified sources. So it's electricity that's not traceable to a specific generating facility, again, traded through open market transactions, typically a mix of power, might include renewables. I think about it in terms of being used for balancing. So what it's really showing there is the difference between what we procure with renewables and hydro, and what's needed to serve those customers. And we'll talk about our path to zero emissions a little bit later, but if we were to replicate this kind of image over the next several years, what you would see is that unspecified portion in gray would continue to get smaller and smaller as we get towards our zero emissions targets, and the other pieces of the pie that's for wind hydro portions would continue to get larger and larger as we move towards there. So next slide. The renewable energy credits, or RECs, and portfolio content category or PCC classifications. This is, are what we use to meet those percentage targets that we saw in the previous slide. So RECs represent clean energy attributes of renewable electricity. It's a certificate that's created when renewable energy is generated. One REC is equivalent to 1 megawatt hour of renewable electricity. And these are classified into 3 distinct categories: PCC 1, 2, and 3. And under RPS, there are limitations to the amount that each group can count towards those requirements. So PCC 1 is considered a bundled product. These are from renewable resources where the energy and the REC are delivered together from the same source. We also have PCC 2, which also come from renewable resources, but they're generated out of state where the energy is used locally. That REC is then bundled with substitute energy that's not from that same source REC, but could also be renewable and delivered at the same time as the REC. And then we have PCC 3s, which are considered unbundled because the REC doesn't have any of that underlying energy that's attached to the product. So where Bright Choice started, in 2018, it was a board-approved product. The carbon-free content at that time was set at 85%. In October of that same year, the board approved use of called the Climate Registry Carbon Accounting Methodology. So the Climate Registry is a nonprofit national emissions accounting methodology used by load-serving entities, including California IUs and CCAs and cities. And that was what was approved to use under the Bright Choice product in 2018. Next slide. Fast forward to 2019, PG&E initiated a formal large hydro nuclear allocation process. This was determined by load shares. Deliveries for that were to start in 2020, and the acceptance of that allocation had 0 incremental cost of CCAs. EDCE initiated discussions on the allocation beginning in November 2019 at the executive committee meeting. That was followed by extensive discussions with the board and CAC at both December 2019 and January 2020 board meetings. There were several questions that came out of those related to risks, benefits, and costs. There was also a separate memo that was put together to address those questions and further discussion on those. That was provided in January of 2020 as well. And so really was a fundamental question that came down to a trade-off between having nuclear and lower GHG emissions, or not having nuclear and accepting higher GHG emissions. And at that time, the board elected to accept the large hydro allocation and rejected the nuclear allocation. Next slide. With that introduction of a carbon-free allocation from PG&E, EDCE's large hydro portfolio was really more in line with PG&E. So the renewable energy was a much more appropriate focus for us. That target was amended to reflect a clean energy procurement floor that was that time based on PG&E's prior year renewable energy power content forecast, plus a 5% buffer for uncertainty. That percentage buffer was determined by looking at previous PG&E renewable power content forecasts and then their actuals, and that based on analysis, a 5% buffer would exceed any difference there. It came to light that there were challenges that existed under this approach due to lack of visibility into PG&E's annual renewable targets, also their changing banking strategy. The reporting lag also means actual values are not fully validated until the fall of the year after the power is procured. So currently, the most recent power content label that we have is for 2021. Here we are in 23, and the 2022 power content label is until October. So those values are not validated until much later. That 5% buffer may have been sufficient to account for that difference in their forecasts in previous years, but it did land us with a little bit of a lower percentage in 21. Next slide. also impacting emissions reporting in 2020 is AB 1110. So this modified the power content reporting methodology and emissions accounting methodology. It fundamentally replaced the previously accepted climate registry emissions methodology. So again, that widely accepted national accounting methodology, and we switched at that time from a global methodology to this California specific methodology. So a few slides back, we talked about PCC2 RECs and EDCP purchasing a portion of renewables as these PCC2 RECs. And again, these are renewable products used and counted as renewable under RPS, by and large solar, wind, and hydro resources generated outside of California. There's clean energy being generated and there's energy or emissions being reduced. It's just that those emissions are being reduced in another state. And because of that, under this California specific methodology that we were then required to adhere to under this new assembly bill, that new accounting adds an emissions factor for those resources equivalent to unspecified system power. Excuse me. Next slide. So where are we now? In 2020, the board adopted a clean energy goal for EDC's portfolio to have 0 net emissions by 2030. And in April of last year, that path to reach that 0 emissions goal was approved. It includes annual targets for renewable and carbon-free procurement. Those are as a percentage of sales. A few months later, in June of 2022, those targets were increased by an additional 5%. So this table reflects those targets, and really having a formal schedule gives us more certainty on annual procurement targets and on power content through 2030. So we'll continue to work to meet or exceed these limits. These targets. But this gives us a lot more visibility than the previous method. There were a number of questions, most recently, I think at the March board retreat related to how EDC compares against other CCAs on power content, emissions, and also rates when compared to PG&E. So this table puts all those pieces together. It takes the 2021 power content label data for the emissions and power content. And it uses January 2023 PG&E rates compared against rates that are currently posted on CCA websites. Although we'll note that although the PG&E rates are from January of this year, many of the CCA rates here are still from 2022, but that's most recently available in terms of comparison. So just to give it a little bit of color, the table is filtered by the emissions column on the far right. EDC is obviously highlighted here in green. To talk through kind of the different pieces here of the 8 CCAs here that have lower emissions as reported on this power content label for 21, 3 of those. So Valley, San Jose, and Pioneer accepted the nuclear allocation. Of the remaining 5, 2 of those, Peninsula and MCE, have higher rates than PG&E, and 1 has a lower renewable and hydro content when compared to EDCE. So that leaves 2, Clean Power SF, which we all know is part of the SFPC, which owns Hetchy. It's a major competitive advantage, gives them access to large hydro generation. And Sonoma is the last one. It's not quite as clear there. My guess is that they were able to secure large hydro or other contracts early on when prices were in a more decent place. But just as a kind of high level overview on some of the differences and why we show up where we show up and why others are presenting that way. Next slide.
1 second. Hey, Izzy, I just want to note that there is an error on that slide. I'm sorry. Can we go back? There are 2 decimal points that are in error. So Clean Power SF and 3CE were not 18.74 and 10 and 56. There's one those decimal points should be 1 step to the other side.
Okay.
I think that's a
Okay. We can take a look at that.
So I think there's an error. I've looked at this. Let's go back and look at those, but I just wanted to clear that they're not, those rates were not, 3CE's rates were not 56% below those of PG&E. It's a small point, but there's an error there.
Wait,
Um,
actually.
Oh, do you want to finish? the-
Sure, yeah,
That's
just
fine.
one more slide, yeah. So this is a 2022 snapshot of our draft power content forecast positions for 2022. The final power content label is mailed out in October, and there's still a formal reconciliation and audit that needs to happen. So again, these are certainly subject to change. It does give an estimate of where we landed on content for 2022. PG&E released draft power content labels last month, so that link on the bottom I included where those were pulled from. It just gives kind of a snapshot in comparison to where we would be against PG&E for this coming power content label.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, before we take questions, I'm gonna recognize the public. Do we have any public comments?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
We have two members with their hands raised. I will recognize Tom Kelly, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Adrian. The presentation was posted, I think yesterday or the day before, so I don't have a complete understanding of the presentation. I'd like to reflect on it a bit and get back to you with my comments, but I have to say it is the best sort of history of this evolution on GHGs that I've seen from EBCE. However, it's missing a couple of big pieces. For example, the JPA agreement clearly states that EBCE will beat PG&E on greenhouse gas emissions. And I thought that, maybe some of this board action over the last couple of years might have modified that in some way. So I went to the JPA agreement that the city of Stockton signed, and it says exactly the same thing as every other jurisdiction signed. That is, that EBCE would beat PG&E on greenhouse gas emissions. The implementation plan says the same thing, even in its modified forms. The enabling legislation that the city of Stockton signed says that it will beat PG&E on greenhouse gas emissions. So, like I say, I'll get back to you with a fuller analysis on this, but the bottom line is that every city that still has Bright Choice as its default product has seen its greenhouse gas emissions spike 5 times greater than PG&E. And frankly, I don't know if the board fully understood what was happening when staff made these recommendations over the last couple of years, but it's obvious that the result is that the JPA agreement is no longer being adhered to. So again, I'll get back to you on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Letts, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you for taking my question. This is a good sort of historical presentation. What I find missing is what the mix of Bright Choice and Renewable 100 is over the years. How many dollars and how many megawatt hours are under each? What fraction of EBCE's product is Bright Choice? How has that changed over the years? How will that change going forward with Stockton being added? So that's I thought was a big piece that's missing, and I would like to see that at some point too. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. There's no further public comment.
Okay, thank you so much. Any questions or comments from committee members? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to staff, we just had a boatload of rain and a lot of people believe there will be some increase in available large hydro over the next year or maybe beyond that. Will there be some large hydro available later in the year, in the next couple of years, that is not already spoken for, that we could, compete for? Is that a thing?
Dan, I would say what we will expect is a higher percentage of large hydro from our allocation in PG&E, because we're getting a prorated share of the large hydro that is being produced. In terms of other large hydro, we're always in the market exploring opportunities to procure more carbon-free energy. So we're certainly looking there. I think one of the dynamics, though, is that while we have certainly had a tremendous amount of snow in California, that has actually not been the case in the Pacific Northwest. So if you go to Oregon and Washington State, they have not had an extremely snowy year. And so I don't think that we're actually expecting outsized hydro imports relative to average. Because the in-state hydro is largely spoken for, there may be opportunities to procure more, but I don't think that it's going to necessarily translate to huge incremental supplies beyond the increase that we will get, which I would expect to be meaningful from our allocation.
Okay, thanks, appreciate that. And just last fall, I asked for staff report of City of Oakland to set the table for us going to transitioning our customers to Renewable 100, both information about commercial, residential, municipal accounts. I hope to get that early this year, but it's supposed to come to the city's Public Works Committee later this spring, and we'll see what the rest of the city council will do based on my recommendations, and hopefully we'll be able to transition by the end of the year.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. A couple questions. So first, just going by our 2030 plan, what it looks like is if we're on track for this, we'll see a significant decrease in our emissions factor in the next year from 555 to 466. That right? And are we on track for that?
We definitely are on track for the emissions to continue to reduce towards that goal. You're saying yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And on that more, because we talked about the power content label a lot, I really appreciated your giving some reasonings in the CCA comparison, because whenever I look at this, I'm looking at trying to find, well, why are we where we are? And I think a lot of it is explained by taking nuclear, whose rates are higher than ours. What are the other weird things like on Hetch Hetchy Dam? And I wonder if when we talk about this next, if we could try and have that narrative more presented, because we get so many questions and concerns about this, and it's hard to, try and explain, well, there are these market forces, there's this, that, and the other thing. So however we can put that narrative more on paper and present it as kind of the headline of this sort of thing, I think could be helpful, because we have so much concern about it. And I'd also love to, because one of the other things that occurs to me that might affect it is, how big are we compared to some of these other places? Is the emission factor exactly, because it, if you take nuclear, your emissions factor is lower. If your rates are higher, your emission factor is often lower. And I wonder if you're bigger, is your emission factor higher? And with all of those, we are in the higher risk factor for having our emissions higher, just because of how we structured ourselves. So let's see that as part. And then we come back to the decision we made previously on the nuclear question. I'm just curious, is that a closed book? Is that something we could reassess in the future at any point?
It is very likely not an opportunity to reassess, because the opportunity for allocation, we believe, this is the last year where that opportunity was going to be on the table, and going forward, either Diablo Canyon will start closing, or it's going to transition to a sort of somewhat different status where the emission zero carbon energy will actually be taken off of PG&E's books and the CCA. So if Diablo continues to operate under the current but revised paradigm, PG&E would no longer be able to count Diablo either, starting in 2024 or 5.
Which means their emission factor will go up very substantially.
Yes, that is correct. Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Is that right? I'm gonna make this announcement one more time. If you'd like to speak in public comment, I'm okay with reopening it, but I really need the public to raise their hand in the beginning when that item is being called. So if there's anyone else that would like to make a public comment, this is your chance to do so. And we'll go ahead and recognize the member.
Excuse me, Becky Dennis, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Just one quick thing. I'm new to this discussion, but I was interested in seeing how we were doing with emissions limits with our current programs. It occurred to me that if more people would sign up for the Renewable 100 program, that would help. But I think that there probably needs to be some incentives for that. So I was wondering for individual consumers, if the board had given any thought to incentives for people that sign up for Renewable 100, possibly with maybe rebates pegged to the price of carbon credits in the market or something, so that they wouldn't see maybe the benefits month to month, but maybe to have an opportunity to participate in the developing carbon market might provide an incentive for more people to sign up. Just a thought. And thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Becky. Anybody else?
There's no further public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. So I appreciate staff giving us this update. This has been an ongoing question from the public for a long time. I do feel like I still need to process all of it, but I appreciate that I can go back and review this, and probably will have later follow-up questions for staff. But I do agree with Member Truman's comment with respect to how do we kind of frame this discussion? Because it is very confusing. There's a lot of moving parts to it. There are decisions that this board has made to lead us to the position we're in today. So I do think there needs to be a slide or two to kind of consolidate, make that very concise, that information. And thank you for asking the question about nuclear. I am confused because in one area it's saying we're not accepting any, but then the pie chart, it has a narrow version. So can you explain that to me? Is this because we're looking at previous and we made the decision, I believe in 2020 to not continue?
Yeah, so that small, I believe it was like 1.7% nuclear is actually connected to our ACS or asset control suppliers. So the portion of our hydro is purchased from the suppliers. They have facilities that they might have a large hydro contract for us, but they have to back that power with sources that could be renewable, could be nuclear, could be gas, could be whatever. But because hydro is not round the clock power, there is a small portion that may come from these unspecified sources. But because of how the power content label needs to be outlined, we have to say exactly where it's coming from. So so that small transient amount of nuclear is specific to asset control supplier, because it's not actual purchased nuclear.
Okay. And then I believe I heard you say that in upcoming years, the unspecified portion is going to decrease and we'll see an increase in hydro, solar, and wind. Do we have a chart where we could show the projections, like 1, 2 years out, what we think that might be, just to give people a better understanding that we are moving in that direction?
Sure, I can definitely add that column, in the chart for the future, but essentially it's the difference, in what our target is and 100%. So, so for, I don't know if I guess we could bring that slide back up really quick, but, for, 2023, for example, the total carbon-free percentage is 71%, so that the target then for unspecified power would be, 29%.
Okay.
And if we go to that last slide, that comparison against PG&E here, so for example, last year on the 2021 power content label, the unspecified portion was at 40%, and our estimate for this year is significantly lower than that. You'll definitely see that unspecified portion go down. Specified is also a major portion of our emissions, so as those unspecified percentages go down, the emission will also be going down.
Okay, and then, to move, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I know that we track how many residents per city are under Bright Choice, correct? We have that data?
We do, I don't know off the top of my head, but
Okay.
we do have it.
Is there a way to look at, as one of the public commenters made, how can we incentivize? I know obviously it's a huge cost to move everyone to Renewable 100, but is there a way that we can make a goal, move 5-10% of the customers? I just want to know what our options are to get people over to Renewable 100. I don't expect an answer now, but would like to see a cost out if that's something we can look at in the future. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So my question is there a decision point that will be coming up sometime this year or whenever that will allow us to get an even cleaner mix? And specifically, one possible example of that might be, I remember we had a windfall of money, and so we one of the things we did was to reduce people's rates in a way where your percentage less than PG&E was going to be higher than it previously was. I'm wondering if at some point when we have a decision point again on rates, if we bring that back down to what it was, does that free up money to get more renewables and therefore have a better power mix? Does my question make sense? I'm just getting tired of it. Who's that?
Nick, do you want to weigh in or anyone else?
I can. I mean, I think that as we get to the budget process and we review the financials, there's always an opportunity to discuss, our power content. I mean, we have, what we presented in April of last year, the kind of path to a carbon-free 2030 was that, it was the path to get there. But it doesn't mean that we are beholden to that per se. I think as we evaluate the financial picture every year, just like we did last year, where we said, we had more money than we expected, and we were able to increase the renewable 5%. I think we're always open to those discussions, but usually kind of ties into the budgetary process.
That's why I was thinking if I'd much rather, I still want us to be less than PG&E rates, the basic rates, but it doesn't need to be a lot less. If it could be only a little less and we can have money for more renewables, to me, it's a better choice. And so, anyway.
Yeah, and just one caveat then, I completely support that. Like, it's just what we're seeing now is a very high cost environment. And so it's also a matter of, if you knock, a 1/10 of a cent, or if you add a 1/10 of a cent, like what is the actual benefit of that? I mean, you're getting like, 0.5% of renewable for all customers. And so I think that decision always weighs on us as well. I mean, the price of renewable energy just in the past 18 months has maybe quadrupled. And so it's just a matter of like, what is the benefit we're getting from that, in addition to the high price environment that we're currently operating in.
Long-term contracts that go on that high up.
I think it's more relative to short-term contracts, which have a lot more annual fluidity, but even the long-term contracts, I mean, the PPAs that we execute in 19 and 20, those prices aren't in the market anymore. And there's nothing really close to them.
Okay. I said I wasn't gonna do this, but there is one more public comment here, but I want to be respectful to the public, but we can't be running our meetings like this every month. So please raise your hand when public comment is called. I'm only gonna recognize the member for 1 minute.
Recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, and my apologies. I am listening to the discussion, but I really wanted to just emphasize that the incentives that EBCE should be offering should be to actually encourage community within the territory, be it residents, municipalities, businesses, to put solar on site, on their rooftops, ground mount. This is why we've been asking for a net energy metering incentive that is mirrors or looks something like net energy metering 2.0. And also like the build out of more microgrids and community-based organizations, because we need to actually do this, but we need EBCE to incentivize this, be it a feed-in tariff, net energy metering, and what other mechanisms we could be powering our own community with on-site solar. And that's what we need to be emphasizing now that this program has been successful in the last 5 years. Thank you.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
There was an op-ed in today's East Bay Times on community solar, which I think dovetails with what Jessica just talked about. I would recommend that we read it and see what we can do to be part of that future.
Thank you. So we are going to close this item and move on to item number 7, committee member stuff announcements, including requests to place items on future committee agendas. I don't know if we normally keep like a running list. I think there was a lot of items that were requested today. I don't know if it's feasible to expect staff to get that information back to us for next month, but maybe we could look at May or June. So maybe we could just keep a list of items that have been requested and we could plan out for the future when to bring them back to this body would be my preference. So we've heard about the solar grids, the microgrids. We're still having discussion about the content level. I think that can come back to us later with some more clarity. And then looking at options of incentivizing or how can we make financial decisions to move some of our customers from Bright Choice to renewable. Are there any other topics, comments that this body would like to hear? Do we know what's on the agenda for next month? It's okay if we don't. Okay. Okay, that's okay. So maybe in the future, we could just have a list of tentative topics, but tentative dates, just so we could start planning accordingly. And I'm gonna make this announcement last again. I will do my best to not forget to open public comments, but please, members from the public, we have to have order in this meeting, so please do raise your hand when public comment is called. Any other comments? Feedback? No? Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.